Welcome to another episode of Growing Pains by Ansa. Growing Pains is our web series where we interview great operators on how to build and scale startups. Today I'm joined by Michele Rizzato to talk about how to navigate your data journey. For background, Michele is a very experienced data leader. He started his career at PwC before joining Facebook. After that, I had the pleasure of working with Michele at Slice, where he's the SVP of Data and Finance, followed by joining Arcadia, a climate company here in New York. And finally, he most recently started his own data consultancy for B2B businesses on how to grow and scale their own organizations. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you, Allan. It's a great pleasure to be here.
To get us started, what advice do you have for Series A startups who don't have a ton of data capabilities, but realize they need to understand their business a lot better?
That's a great question. I mean, look, when you're at Series A stage, there's so much stuff going on, right? You kind of have a product market fit, but you're really not sure about everything that's going on, and everyone is so heads down in making sure that the business is healthy and grows and there's momentum. And so on one end, you don't want to lose sight of that. You want to make sure that that keeps going. But on the other end, there are real questions that need and should be answered with data. One way or the other, you need to get it done. You need to be able to answer some of those questions with data. And I actually am a strong believer that asking the right question is even more important than, or at least more critical and harder than answering it with data. So my first advice would be make sure there is someone who is data-driven and data-savvy, who is able to formulate and ask the right question, the question that is important for the business. It could be, the business could be thinking about what's the right CAC for us. Another way to look at a similar question is what's the LTV of our customer base? Those are similar and questions that are very much related to each other, but which one to ask actually has important implications on the time that an analyst spends in doing their work. And so what I would say is, first of all, make sure that there's at least someone who is quantitative enough to be able to identify what the best question is, and then technical enough who can just go down on unstructured data sets and grind it out and work on the data to figure out what the actual answer is. That's part number one. Part number two, I would say, from a technology and infrastructure point of view, make sure that there is at least someone, typically on your engineering team, who starts thinking about what the future state of your data infrastructure looks like, right? At this stage, at Series A, really, you probably don't have like 50 data technology questions that you need to answer. You don't even have 10. But sometimes you have one or two. It could be about what data platform do we need to have? Do we need a data platform? And so if we need to have one, how do you think about going with one vendor versus the other? Do you need Snowflake? Do you need Redshift? Is Databricks better? Those are actually high switching cost kind of decision. And so having even just one engineer who can start thinking about those before you actually hire a proper team of data engineers is another important aspect. So I would say that's the advice that I would give to a Series A startup, to just get it started and get it done with data.
That's great advice. If I play that back to you, I hear ask the right questions, get the best team, and use the right technology.
That's right.
To best understand how do you go from 0 to 1 as a Series A startup trying to do data.
That's right. And make sure that those initial decisions that you make are well thought through. 1 to 3 great decisions at that stage, rather than trying to answer 15 or 20 questions in a way that's not really well structured and well thought.
That's incredibly helpful. So now we've gone from 0 to 1. If we want to go from 1 to 100, what happens next? What do we do? Where do we invest? How do we focus?
That's where I think you start really building more about, start thinking more about your team and the technology behind it, right? I'm actually not a big believer in preset frameworks and approaches. I think they're a bit constraining, especially for early stages and mid-stage startups. But one that always that I think is always helpful is this people, processes, and technology kind of framework, right? And I actually like to substitute processes with partnership, and maybe we can touch on that a little later. So as you scale from 1 to 100, I would say, first of all, data teams are privileged in a certain way because their impact is talent-driven. So make sure that you start thinking about your data organization and the real talent and skill sets that you want to bring to the team. And make sure that you start in identifying what those key initial hires and building blocks of your data function and capabilities are going to be. That could be initial, high-performing individual contributor or a director of analytics. It could be a core data engineering team, for example. Make sure that those are well identified. And those are always going to depend on what your business actually does. But generally speaking, 80% of the time, a good core foundation of analytics, a good core foundation of data engineering is going to need to be there. And then on the technology side, that's where you actually start building your data infra. Data is now a very complex ecosystem of software and technology interacting with each other, within each other, and with the rest of your production applications as well as your business applications, right? Make sure that you keep making good, intelligent decisions there. High ROI decisions. Of course, you always need a data platform to get started. You will need a good sort of pipeline and orchestration architecture. Make sure that you start having a visualization and dashboarding tool so that people don't have to do everything in Excel pivot tables. So keep expanding from there. And then on the partnership side, very important, I'm a big believer in, again, data should not ever be a siloed org that just works within itself. Data is potentially the most cross-functional team in the organization. And so make sure that everyone is not just bought into the data strategy, but the data leader and the team works with and for the company and to push the company forward via the right questions that I mentioned before.
It's really clear that having a great data leader is of critical importance to building a good data culture, data tech stack, and a data-focused organization. In all of your past work, it's pretty clear that you were the centralized data leader that the rest of the strategy and team flowed out from. It would be great if you could walk us through why you should have a central data team leader within an organization. And if so, what do I look for? What's the background I'm looking for? What are the qualities in a data leader I should be looking for? How do I find that perfect person?
Well, first of all, I actually think that I myself was leading data organizations, and I strongly believe that having a centralized data team is a big plus and growth driver for the business. I think that works well in a number, probably the majority of cases. Sometimes it does, in some cases it does not, and so we also want to be mindful of that. I do think though that for, again, technology companies and early, mid and late stage startups, that's actually a great setup for a few reasons. One reason is what I would call the clustering of talent. I mentioned talent before, and that's really where I always start from as a data leader, right? We are at the point, data is at a point of sort of in its evolution journey and sophistication where talent wants to cluster cluster together closely and work together. There is a level of really data community, I would say, that a data leader needs to build so that all the members of the team feel empowered to be working towards the same goal and really contributing to the mission of the company within a data team, within a strong data org. And that also helps a lot with professional development and training, to have that sort of clustering of great data talent working together as engineers, as analysts, as data scientists. It's really a multidisciplinary approach in which business problems are learned and solved with data and technology. So that's one. Two, I would say, especially as you think about asking those right questions that I mentioned earlier, independence is also a good reason in my mind. Making sure that once you look at a number and describe a number and report a number, you're doing that in a way that is as unbiased as possible. Look, there's always, ultimately, I'm a statistician. There will always be bias in what you do, and you need to accept that as a fact of life. But trying to be as unbiased as possible is incredibly important to speak truth to where the business is going and needs to go in the future. And of course, having a centralized data organization, especially from an analytics perspective, helps with that because you're going to avoid situations in which you have analysts who work with your sales team or with your marketing team or with your product team, who might be sometimes thinking about even just metrics in a slightly different way, or describing the performance of some product or initiative or campaign in a way that might not be, again, as unbiased as possible. Again, this is my own advice, at least. I think, to be fully transparent with you, I think there is no magic formula here. But some characteristics that I think are really helpful are a combination of, first of all, technology excellence, right? You need, again, data is a technology play, a technology domain at the end of the day. And being able to clearly understand and articulate the value that technology brings to and how technology enables data teams is, a requirement for that type of job. Secondly, I think the ability to lead and motivate and hire teams. So like the people aspect of the job is also paramount. So being able to someone who is able to hire and motivate the right people, and also create those cross-functional partnerships that are really needed to grow the business with data. Third, and this is probably the most important one, someone who is able to really have that level of inquiry that's critical to ask those right questions, right? Again, once assuming that you have the right people and that you have the right technology, the path to answer a question is kind of well understood, so it's known. But be able to ask those questions and to look at the business from a very strategic and inquiry-driven and hypothesis-based point of view is paramount. And someone who's able to do that is also critical, right? So sometimes that comes from strategy consulting. Sometimes, I was coming from an accounting firm. Sometimes it comes from, it could come from all sorts of backgrounds, but someone who can think a little bit with a very wide aperture, I would say, mentally, and then execute from there.
I'm going to probably be stealing ruthless execution for myself and the rest of our team. It definitely applies not just to data, so thank you for that.
Of course.
So now we've identified what the key questions are we're trying to answer. We have identified a data leader who's hopefully joining our team to help lead this practice. And now in my mind, the next stage is figuring out what technology, what software we should be using to build our own data stack. When I see the data market and I cover it from an investment perspective, it seems like every day there's a new technology, a new feature, a new platform that you can be buying. How do you ensure that you're only buying things that you really need? And what software pieces and elements do you think are really essential? Let us know if you have any favorite vendors as well.
That's actually really important, especially if I look at my finance background too. Even in the past, 4 years, let's say, compared to pre-pandemic, the software ecosystem for data has become incredibly complex now. There is software that can solve folds in the problem set of the data teams that were kind of even unknown just a few years ago. And that's amazing on one end, but on the other end, it reinforces the need to be extremely, I would say, selective and thoughtful about not only how you ask your questions, but in how you set up your software stack for data. Otherwise, you are going to have issues with your CFO at some point down the line, right? As a matter of principle, my advice would be, again, let's start, once we have that clarity of strategy and what we need to do as a data team, let's start with fundamentals. What are the key pieces of software that we know are needed? We know that something that will always need to be solved for a data team is an ingestion framework that allows the data team to really gather data from all the sources that generate that data, right? So that's one piece. You know that then you will always have and need to have a orchestration system that pipes the data and schedules all the data pipelines for that data to be brought into, let's say, it could be your data lake or your data lakehouse, and you could call it data warehouse. Essentially, your storage system where data is staged and stored. You will then need a layer that can transform that unstructured data into structured kind of data sets that can be used for any kind of purposes. So it could be analysis, it could be data science models, machine learning, AI, whatever you do with them. And then you will need a system that if you are if you're an analyst, is going to help you run those analyses and show the results to someone visually, like a dashboard into a visualization tool. If you're a data scientist, it could be a system that then allows you to bring your models back into the production environment to serve the results of those models to your customers. So you see that I've already spoken about probably 5 to 7 different pieces, and those are quite important pieces. They are high investment, and they are, again, what I would call high switching cost pieces of your data infrastructure. Choosing them wisely is important, but the good news is that I think now there's phenomenal vendors out there that help a lot with these choices. There are still some important choices that you need to make. For example, if we go back to the ingestion piece, do you recognizing whether your company is mostly focused on ingesting data on a batch basis, let's say every night, or whether you need a real-time stream of data to power what you do as a data team is an important difference, and that one that can lead to different sort of outcomes in the decisions that you make. Or if you look at your critical part of your data platform, there's, again, amazing software solutions out there. I'm thinking about, obviously, Snowflake. I'm thinking about Databricks. Which one you choose is really a function of what you want to achieve as a team. And sometimes you might need more than one. If you're very analytics driven, then the traditional safe choice is going to be, let's say, a Snowflake, right? But if you want more control, more personalization, and really you are building really more high-tech team and talent and want to be able to quickly iterate on machine learning and AI models to power your products, maybe then you should have a stronger look at platforms like Databricks, for instance. Visualizations tools, the similar applies. What is the tool that allows you to build not just dashboards, but products that communicate your insights visually to someone, right? That's really important. Some of these tools are more suited for a technical audience. Some of these are more suited for a marketing audience. Some of these are more suited for, let's say, your C-suite or even the board. And so how you choose those tools is also highly dependent on the audience that you have. So those are some of the initial thoughts there. You need to be able to solve that to begin with. That's sort of main structure, your core infrastructure that I described. You should have, as you get into Series B and closer to Series C, that needs to be running well. Then, in my mind, you can start thinking about, okay, what are the sort of other important problems that I need to solve and that I need to address that are not just as top priority, without which I just don't have a platform, but allow you to actually scale well. And then you get into the areas of how do I manage your semantic layer? How do you manage data observability? How do you manage sort of data quality, not as a big problem, but as components in different parts of your pipeline? How do you manage data governance and your data catalog? Those, we could be speaking about those for many hours, but in general, those start to become really important and relevant as you get closer to, let's say, probably a Series C and or when you have an exit or a public listing sometime in your 2 to 4 year horizon.
Oftentimes when I hear of AI versus the human employee workforce. So how do you think technology aligns with human workers? And how does AI fit into that equation?
That's a great question. I think, no one has completely figured it out just yet, right? But ultimately, I'm a technologist at heart, and I believe in the power of technology to really enhance human capabilities and augment human capabilities. So I don't see AI necessarily in and of itself as a threat to human workforce, but as a way to make their work easier and more effective and stronger, right? I think about the opportunities that AI has to potentially identify better sales pitches, for example, in ways that are already happening, or in drafting more precise and better templates for legal documents or contracts, or in copies for marketing campaigns. Those things ultimately make humans, again, more effective at their jobs. And it will be a very synergic relationship in my mind. It will take learnings from both the technologists and the data people behind AI and the rest of the organization that not just adopts AI, but that will be sort of affected and impacted by it. But certainly I don't see it as an us versus them type of relationship. This is, again, this is a perfect example of data and technology being able to improve how the organization runs, not threatening how the workforce and employees at the organization. That's my strong belief, at least.
So we've been talking a lot about the benefits of data and AI. I'd love to spend some time talking about the risks. So what considerations should we be thinking about when we're thinking about implementing new data strategies, new AI strategies internally? How do we manage those potential considerations and risks?
That's a great question. I would actually like to sort of address that first by talking a little bit about AI within the organization and then a bit more broadly within society, so to speak. Within the organization, there's real considerations that the business needs to make around some potential implications and risks that are brought by AI. And I'm thinking mainly about data privacy and data security, for instance, right? Both the input and the output of large language models, general AI models, and even your traditional machine learning models that have been used for many years now, mean that there is a real risk for PII or more generally data that it should be private to be exposed or utilized in a way that is either not ethical or sometimes actually does not comply with laws and regulations that the company needs to, of course, respect. And so those are important areas to keep into account. The answer to that is, again, I believe a bit multidisciplinary in nature, meaning that you need to have the technical people who are developing those models well versed into the broader implications that AI models have. And on the other end, you need to be able to establish that sort of data governance and policy, if you will, capabilities once you get into that AI territory within your data team. That can help you in both thinking about, writing, and implementing some general principles, and even down to training and education for not just the data team, but for the rest of your business in terms of what's possible with AI, what are the opportunities, but where do we need to be careful? What are the boundaries that we should not cross, and where do we want to also be maybe making decisions about something we are going to do, some things we are not going to do because of the even legal profile of the company that we run, especially if we are in some specific businesses or if we are a publicly traded company versus a private company. So that's an important piece. The second piece, I think, of that question is more broadly, if you think about our society, what kind of risks can AI bring to us as a society? And that's I think an answer that today no one has, but I think it's really important for sort of practitioners and engineers and scientists to work together within themselves, but also with the broader community of policymakers and economists and even philosophers, if you will, to make sure that, again, AI, like all the other technologies that we developed as a humankind, is used and deployed in a way that ultimately empowers the humankind and human being versus in ways that threaten all of us. I'm generally biased towards being a technology optimist, so I actually think that the advantages of AI for the firm and for society are going to be much greater than the risks, but that doesn't mean that those risks are real, and we need to keep them in mind as we continue developing on that front.
I'm also a technology optimist, so I agree with you, and I look forward to finding ways for regulators, technologists, philosophers, and everyone in between to find great ways to use AI and data to really better our world. And to wrap up, I'd love to hear maybe your number one piece of advice for someone who's looking to start a data team or build out data systems.
I'll start with a provocative thought, if you will, which is this.
Please do.
There is no such thing as a data strategy. There is the company strategy. And what everyone else at the company does is have sort of functional strategies that bring that company strategy to life with technology, with marketing, with sales, and with data. And so number one advice, especially starting from a data leadership perspective, is do not think about and build a data strategy without first understanding the needs and the strategy and the vision and even the plan of what the company is trying to achieve. Everything follows from there. The data strategy is your company strategy applied within the domain of data that is going to enable that strategy and make it real. Everything then downstream is going to translate into the people that we mentioned, the technology that we mentioned, the partnership that we mentioned. But it starts with, again, a data strategy that exists. It's not like it doesn't exist, but needs to be tied and serving and enabling your overarching corporate strategy. And you need a data leader who is able to clearly understand that. And that's the number one advice that I would give to a CEO who's looking to hire the first data leaders in their org.
That's great advice. It's all about alignment. Data should be aligned with the overall arching goals for the organization and each of the teams that it supports and works with. So really appreciate you coming and joining us on this installment of Growing Pains. It was fantastic to hear about how you should think about finding and identifying the right questions, finding the right leader and having them join your team, building out the right technology, and incorporating things like AI to make your team more efficient and more effective. And so it was fantastic to have you here with us today. Everyone should try to work with Michele with his new data consultancy, and we look forward to working with him with our portfolio at Ansa. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Allan. It's been a pleasure. It was a pleasure being here.